Welcome to So Very Wrong About Games, a board gaming podcast about board games. I'm here with my great co-host, Mark. How are you today, Mark?
I'm quite well, Walker. How are you?
I am fantastic. We have the normal lineup. We're going to talk about the games we played this week. Mark's going to talk about Old King's Crown and all-in predictions. And I'm going to talk about Recall and Finspan.
And many more.
Amongst many more, yes. And then we're going to talk about the news and why it doesn't matter, which include Mark's going to talk about the next upcoming thing from Jenna Felly. And then our main review, which is going to be GotY. Mark, what did you play this week?
Well, as mentioned, I got a chance to return to the Old King's Crown. This is a game that we had on a board of play of about a year ago. Walker, are you familiar with the editorial edict, Kill Your Darlings?
No, I do not. Kill your darlings.
Kill your darlings. This is the recommendation that as an author, you should be willing to excise things that you're very, very pleased with. Typically in terms of writing, if it's a passage you really like, you think there's a really great turn of phrase, but if it doesn't suit the overall structure of the thing, if it doesn't suit the story, doesn't suit the pacing, it doesn't aid the reader for whatever reason, you have to be willing to get rid of things that you even really, really like. It's an idea to be ruthless in the sense that sometimes you have to be willing to get rid of things. You can't be too precious. But it's like, oh, but I really like this thing. It's so cute, and I like the... So many people have commented over the years that Kickstarter and crowdfunding more generally has led to a circumstance in which there's less of an editorial input. It's more of a one-person design, and sometimes this results in necessary pruning not happening. And I give to you a new poster child for this, and that is the Old King's Crown, a series of 3 or 4 different games shackled together with way more special effects that can be plausibly internalized even after several plays. Nominally, it's kind of like a blind bidding game that is shackled on top of another blind bidding mechanism, which is shackled on top of a weird pseudo-political element that sometimes can be accessed by one of the blind bidding subsections and sometimes isn't. This is all, of course, assuming that some special power hasn't canceled the phases entirely or effectively rendered any of them meaningless, and full of lots of surprise sort of, oh, well, that rendered everything I did pointless this turn moments, which is definitely the sign of an excellent game. You really, you're sitting around and saying, oh, I thought about what to do with my turn. I thought about how to use my cards, and someone says, Uno reversal, nothing matters. And everyone laughs and has a good time. Yeah? Well, if that describes your gaming group, you should play the Old King's Crown. If any of that strikes you as borderline torturous, I encourage you to avoid it. Honestly, so much of the praise being directed to Old King's Crown, I kind of understand and kind of don't. I kind of understand because some of the elements there are kind of cool. The first thing you do every round of the Old King's Crown is you engage in blind bidding for these territory cards that serve as one of the many ways to get new special powers. And the fundamental dynamic of that is really kind of cool, unless, of course, somebody uses a special power to render that phase meaningless and moot, but whatever. I think, honestly, that by itself could have been the backbone of a reasonably pleasant, lightish card game. You then move on to a blind bidding phase in which you're blind bidding for a series of point rewards and other sundry extraneous rewards, but that in turn is coupled with a weird sort of doublethink of, oh, I played the assassin, no, I played the assassin reverso card, so your assassin is killed and my other thing is alive and all manner of other things. Now, there's a certain level of chaos I'm willing to tolerate in lots of games. And indeed, the comparison set that often gets thrown in my face is Cosmic Encounter. I will defend Cosmic Encounter. I enjoy the game. The trick is that the Old King's Crown just keeps going past beyond where it needs to be. Part of this is information presentation. Every faction is unique. Every faction has 4 what's called tactics, which represent these tiny little chits at the bottom of their board. And maybe if you could internalize what all 16 tactics that could be triggered at any given time were going to do to you, you might be able to plan more intelligently or not. So again, for example, I was playing a faction that just said everyone else's cards during that first phase that I said was potentially interesting have a strength of 0. Just so long, bye. You're not doing anything this phase. Ugh. The worst part about that dynamic, though, is, and I can keep going about this for any given dynamic in the Old King's Crown, it zeroes out the value of all the cards, which means that it sends them all to a tiebreaker, right? So you played your 2. Somebody else decided they really wanted to win this, and they played their 11. Well, now it's just going to go to the tiebreaker, and so now your 2 is going to beat their 11 because of a power I played to protect myself from maybe somebody else who's going to take something from me. And it's all these unintended, obtuse consequences that I think come at the expense of genuine decision-making. things happen in the Old King Crown. Some of them are superficially cool because special abilities are often very fun to play with and very cool. But many of them are accidental side effects of the weird combinatoric elements of these gonzo special powers that are almost impossible to internalize. Certainly after a first play, and for many people after a third, fourth, fifth play.
And I felt in the little bit that we played, most of them are directed into like sort of take that feeling as well.
Absolutely. And as I say, even worse than take that, sort of a take something, someone take something. It's not even that I play a card for Walker and say, Walker, you get smacked in the face real hard. I just do an effect, and as a second or third side effect of that effect, somebody gets punched in the face real hard. And maybe they should have known better, but so often that's mired by, again, number one, the information presentation, and number two, the impossibility of internalizing all these effects and all their consequent results. Sometimes it's enjoyable to go through the motions and just find out what happens as a result of the third Uno Reversi that gets played out there, but this is not the fodder for a 2-hour strategy game. I'm sorry. It ended up feeling incredibly arbitrary and unsatisfying when the core mechanics were being undermined constantly in ways that basically tied the hands of everyone else. And I think that the response that I've seen from some players will figure it out and find a way to overcome it, and that's the joy of the game. I don't think that's very compelling, and I don't think that is actually matching with the experience of playing the Old King's Crown. I compared it unfavorably after playing it the first time to Albedo, because Albedo itself is a blind bidding game about grabbing territory, but it manages to soften the edges of a lot of blind bidding's problems. The Old King's Crown exacerbates a lot of the problems of blind bidding. It's also an unhelpful comparison because Albedo focuses in on one of the many, many sub-elements that are going to go on in the game of Old King's Crown, but that just proves my original point. They're the bones of a couple good games here, not the bones of one good game. So I'm not going to be going back to Old King's Crown if I can possibly help it. Way overlong, arbitrary, confusing, not well presented, not satisfying. This was designed, and the art was done by Pablo Clark. The art is really good. That is one thing I will say unambiguously about the Old King's Crown. The cards are really nice looking. But this is absolutely a situation that needed a strong editorial hand, and I'd be surprised if Eerie Idle Games provided any of that. This seems like a one-person show with a bunch of playtesters who really got deep in the weeds and could recite for you from memory all 16 of those special tactics, and just knows like, well, I could do this, but it'll be countered by this other thing. It's like, ooh, now it's a game. Maybe. I don't know. Not for me. Old King's Crown.
I got an older game to the table. This is called Keltis, designed by Reiner Knizia and put out by KOSMOS Games. And it's one of the typical sort of, I don't want to say climbing game, but you are trying to go up these tracks and you're playing out runs in front of you. You can either go up or down. So you play a 10, you go down to 0, or you play 0 and you go up to 10. At the beginning, I just could not believe that there was no way to sort of clear a row. So if you start playing pink cards and you go like 10, and I just can't seem to get any more pink cards. So you go 5 and then 4, and then, you've run out of room. There is 0 ways to clear that row. And at first I just thought that was awful, but the game plays so quickly. It's really a game of when are you just going to buckle down and start playing cards, because either you're discarding a card to the pool to get a card from the pool, or you're playing a card and taking it off the top of the deck. And so there's these, 4 or 5 different color tracks that you're going up, and some of the spaces as you move will give you abilities like moving on other tracks or some other things. But it's very much just, I'm going to try to get a hand of some decent cards, and now I got to start playing because the game is about to end. And if I don't get far enough up these tracks, I'm going to get negative points. And I thought it was pretty great.
Just last week, I was talking about Schottentotten, right? About how Reiner Knizia card games, every play is a commitment, and sometimes you wish you could pass. It's precisely that issue. In Keltis, you play that 6 when the last card you played was a 3, and you figure, is the 4 or the 5 going to come up and make me regret my life? But you have to do it. Time moves forward, and you have to take those hits. Have you played the Lost Cities board game upon which Keltis is based?
We did. Yes, we have.
Yeah, so there's Lost Cities, the card game, which then became Keltis, which is kind of like the board game implementation. And then when Keltis was brought over to the English-speaking world, it was rethemed as Lost Cities, the board game, in which you play 3 rounds in succession. So Keltis is just one round, very much like the card game.
Yeah, it was painful too. There was like 2 rounds in a row. I like would play like a 1 or a 2, and then I'd draw a card. It would be the 0, or I think I played a 7 and I drew the card. It was the same color and it was the 10. It was just like, this is not going to work well for me.
Well, fortunately, there are other colors to be had, and that's one of the
true.
reasons why it's good to play multiple rounds, because it helps even out the luck of the draw somewhat.
Yeah, and like I said, it plays so quickly that you can do that. It's like, okay, well, that round was bad. Let's reset, go again, and it's like play a card, draw a card, play a card, draw a card. If you get a good group that gets the flow down, game goes 30 minutes, if not less.
There were 2 expansions to Keltis that never got localized to the Lost Cities version. There was basically an alternate board which had intersecting paths. You could be sending your tracks up to different colors. And another one was called the Oracle. And both of them I thought were really, really cool. And that's why I got a copy of Keltis, so I could have the alternate versions. And I really like the variants. It takes the same sort of, as you say, climbing-ish element and offers new opportunities. And I really liked it.
Yeah, Simi has those. He said, first I'll show you, baby Keltis, and then we're going to do super advanced Keltis. So we'll probably try that next week, and I'll let you know how it went.
Good stuff. Hope you enjoyed it. On the topic of older Knizias, I'm going to one-up your slightly older Knizia with among the oldest of Knizias, a game published in 1993. So this is pre-modern art. This is pre-Medici. This is pre-Catan even. And it's called Das letzte Paradies. It has never been localized into English. It is about property development on a vacation destination island. This is a blind bidding game, and it is a game that is very much unlike the contemporary Euro idiom in a lot of ways. Most Euro games and management games, profit is more or less guaranteed. The exceptions are always fascinating to me, and Das letzte Paradies is one of those games. In point of fact, if you end up with less money than you started with, you immediately lose. This happened to one of the players, and it almost happened to 2 of the players, and we were playing a 3-player game. And this is because the profit margins are razor thin. I don't know if they're too razor thin. I'm not going to quibble about the mathematical evaluations from Reiner Knizia. It's just the scoring opportunities are few and far between. Effectively, what happens is every round a new tile comes up for auction, and you do a blind bid. The winner pays the bank the bid of the second highest bid. So if I bid 5, Asimi bids 10, and Walker bids 15, Walker pays 10 to the bank. And so you're never completely indifferent as to what the total of your bid is. You want to be able to run up the bid for the sake of whoever's doing the blind bidding. But of course, again, money is so tight, it's very, very difficult to consider how to do this. When you win a property tile, you either just sock it in with your ownership, and there are some benefits for having all the tiles in a certain quadrant or having a tile in each quadrant, but these payouts happen once and they're not much. Or you can turn the property into forested area, which does 2 things. Number 1, it gives an immediate, very small payout to all the other properties in that territory that were not turned into forest, and it gives you a tree, and there's scoring at the end of the game for whoever has the most trees. But again, not much. I realized about halfway through the game that I was headed very, very, very directly in a course towards not bankruptcy, but effectively the same in the context of a game of Das letzte Paradies. I started with $300, and I figured, okay, if I'm lucky and I spend $0 more and I win the following 2 contests, I will end up with $305. If I buy anything else, I don't think I'm qualifying for anything else, and I'm not going to be able to even contest the win. And so I just stopped trying to win tiles at that point, desperately scrabbling for every errant penny, and I barely avoided the auto loss condition. It was really strange. There was another Knizia economic game that had a similar dynamic in that you easily lost money. It was the 2-player Medici versus Strozzi, in which frequently it was nominally a game about money, and money was the victory condition, but most people lost money over the course of the game. I don't know if that was his critique of capitalism or what, because, again, in most Knizia games, you make money, because most Euro games you do, and there's cultural analysis to be done there, and I think someday I'll probably try to do a little bit more of it. But as it is, it was very, very strange to have this kind of dynamic. It was a great blast from the past. I don't know if I'd ask for it too much again, because it was an interesting experience, but that kind of tightness of money and parsimony of victory conditions, and also just I'm not a huge fan of blind bidding generally, like sprinkled in here and there, or if it's done in a really clever way like Albedo, it's not my preferred method of auction. And even in the context of Knizia's other early auction games, like Modern Art, blind bidding is the exception rather than the rule. So it was really clever, really cool. I'm always happy to see games from the 20th century that I hadn't played before. And it was very interesting and very unlike a lot of the rest of things you'd be playing in a contemporary context, but not necessarily anything past a very interesting novelty as far as I'm concerned. So that was Das letzte Paradies, with my apologies to all the German speakers of the world, designed by Knizia, published by KOSMOS in an unnecessarily ginormous box in 1993.
We got to play Keep the Heroes Out back to the table. I think we both love this. And since I was introducing it to new players, we just played the base game. We did go like further ahead in the standard missions that I'd play and that I hadn't played before. So we weren't playing the boss battles. So we weren't doing this, sort of a more elaborate game. And it just made me think of how great this game is, because they have so many different monsters you get to play, and the way that he made them so different by just changing up the deck slightly or giving certain monsters more characters or one big monster. So we had a Simi playing the dragon, and it would bust down hallways, and so it did a lot of moving attacks, and then it did ranged attacks, which I immediately told him, that's just you breathing fire. So he got right into it, breathing fire down the halls, destroying the heroes. And I was playing the slimes, and they're great because in their deck they have all these defense cards, and every time they're attacked, they split into more slime. So not only do they block the attack, but now you're putting out more slime. So, and there's these adorable meeples, and once you get through like maybe even the first or second round, the sort of the AI that controls the heroes is very simple and programmative. So you can sort of plan out what's going to happen. It's like, we need to get more monsters down this hallway because they've opened up some of the chests. And if we don't sort of clog up that run with a bunch of monsters that are going to slow them down, they're going to streamline right to your treasure room. And that's pretty well the main objective of every game, is that you need to sort of exhaust the heroes, and they exhaust either by trying to open up chests or killing your monsters. You don't have to worry about them killing your monsters because you respawn them, but that's just what you need to do to slow them down. But unfortunately, sometimes one will get through, and if they get through to a room that has other heroes in it that have already acted, they energize all those heroes as well. So it's this cascading effect, and you just got to try to make sure you don't let that happen.
Yeah, from a large scale perspective, I agree with you. The AI is simple to react to, right? You see them charging down a hallway, they're gathering numbers. Obviously, then you go shove some monsters in that hallway to try to deal with them. But my experience of playing Keep the Heroes Out, which I agree gets by on charm and asymmetry and cuteness, is that the cascading, concatenating series of disasters from a single weird hero spawn, I still can't wrap my head around it, and I can't tell if this is because I never fully internalized how the AI worked, or if that's just a feature and that's the intended result, that you're never fully safe, and the right or wrong random result can cause everything to spiral out of control. And honestly, that's why I've found the end game conditions, or rather the end state of Keep the Heroes Out, to have been generally unsatisfying.
Yeah, unfortunately, like I've always said, cooperative games sort of rely on randomness a lot. And that is, like you said, it's going to be the flipping at the end of every player's turn. They flip up where the heroes are going to spawn. And that's either going to make the game and make it feel as though, this slow advance of heroes and that you can figure it out, or they're going to keep showing up in the same place and they're going to run that line and you're going to lose without being able to do anything about it. So there is that. But like you said, it gets by on cuteness alone.
Which again highlights the enduring genius of Pandemic, right? Because it starts out purely random in terms of how the game is reacting to you. And as the game proceeds, it gets more and more deterministic as it gets harder and harder, which is fabulous.
True, you could math out, Keep the Heroes Out, right? Because the deck. There's probably going to be X number of spawns, and because all the rooms are sort of labeled, you've got the skull rooms, the potion rooms, they all have their symbols, and there's going to be X number of each one. And I guess if you want to totally game out, you say, well, we've already had, 2 skull and bones, there's only going to be one, you could do it that way, but I don't think it doesn't take long enough to worry about that, and it's just fun enough to play it the way it is, I think.
Sure.
Keep the Heroes Out. It's all a one-man show. Luís Brüeh, I believe it's pronounced. He does all the art and is the designer, and he's come out with many expansions with all sorts of different monsters, unicorns and fire embers and you name it. And it goes different ways. Now there's also another whole expansion where you get to play the heroes instead of the monsters. And like we've talked about, there's a main boss expansion, which unlocks all sorts of different monsters. I do want to get back to that because there's this great werewolf faction where there's all these like little tiny pups and they look adorable.
Oh, yeah.
I want to get them out onto they look great. Keep the heroes out. Fantastic.
Yeah, sometimes one-man show works out well. They don't all turn out the old King's Crown. I played All In Predictions. This is by Phil Walker Harding, published by Next Move Games this year. It's also on Board Game Arena, which is where I tried it. And admittedly, I only played with 2, which is not an ideal player configuration. But it is kind of, I would interpret it as Phil Walker Harding's kind of competitive response to the game, in that it is a poker base and you are competing both to get the best poker hand, because you're going to get points based on how good the poker hand is. So, for example, you're going to get 1 point for a pair, 6 points for a full house, and a variety of things in between and so forth. But you also get points by predicting who is going to have the best hand. And the relative value of those 2 scoring conditions can and will fluctuate over the course of the game. And that part is potentially yet more interesting when there's more than 2 players, right? Because predicting who's going to have the better hand in 2 players is not as interesting with 3, 4, or 5. On top of that, the card play is weird. I kind of enjoyed it. It's very strange in that it operates off of a standard 52 card deck, but every card has a variety of effects on them. And they mostly relate to cycling your hand. So you have 5 cards in front of you. It's not Texas Hold'em. And I might start with a pair, or I might start with 2 pair or whatever. And I play a card and it might say, okay, well, you get to draw some number of cards from a variety of different sources and keep which card you want and discard the rest. Like, okay, well, this is clearly just a way to fish for better ones. But then there are more interesting special effects, like you get to ask one opponent what rank their hand is at this time, or you get to engage in some other forms of clairvoyance or what have you, in terms of trying to get some sense of what your opponents have. And eventually, the reason why the game is called All In, someone can go all in, and what that does is that accelerates the round timer. They don't get to take turns anymore. They're also immune from a variety of questions, and the game clock accelerates, and you hurtle towards the end of the round when everyone makes their predictions. I would classify All In as a very, very, very light experience, but I enjoyed it. I would be interested in trying it with more players. As I say, with 2, it's obviously not at its best. It functioned fine, but there wasn't a whole lot of nuance in the prediction, and there wasn't enough of a sort of universe of points in the economy to really make the trade-off of having a good poker hand versus making a good prediction really sing. Because at some point, I would find it yet more interesting if it were the case that you figure, okay, well, my hand is real garbage. Maybe I should lean into that and I'll make more points off the back end through other means. So that was All In Predictions. Very, very light, but I enjoyed it. I'd try it again. Phil Walker Harding, Next Move Games, published this year. Give it a shot on Board Game Arena if you're at all inclined.
Well, we streamed Finspan again. We had done that before, but now they have a new expansion for it. This is called Sharks and Reefs. And any game that, if you add more sharks, like a tornado, it just gets cooler.
Did the base Finspan not have sharks?
I'm sure it had 1 or 2, but this has so many more sharks.
You gotta have more sharks.
Well, I didn't see any sharks from the original game. I saw a ton of sharks from the expansion, though. And I had the 2 coolest sharks, Mark. What are the coolest sharks? Well, the great white shark and the whale shark. We both know that those are the best sharks. And I had them both.
Hammerhead.
I don't know.
Hammerhead is the best shark.
No.
Okay.
The original Finspan is designed by David Gordon and Michael O'Connell. Michael O'Connell's name is the only one that's on the expansion. This is put up by Stonemaier, and is very much sort of a sister game of Wingspan. It's very much the same thing. You're playing aquatic life into these rows, and then you're running these rows, and a lot of the fish have, when that row is activated, it does the special things, and you're trying to get groups of things, and there's achievements that you want to get every round, and so on and so forth. Things that are different. You're not like sort of tied to the resources like you are in Wingspan. In Finspan, your resources are fish eggs, let's call them minnows and your cards, and you're tracking fish eggs and minnows on your board, much like eggs in Wingspan, and you get to hatch them, and they hatch into minnows, and then when you group 3 minnows together, they become a school. And there's sort of that whole mini game of moving that stuff around your board and maximizing that, because you need those to pay for putting out fish, and you're discarding cards. You're also cycling your cards a lot more than you normally would, because one of the rows that you activate, you also get to, you get to fish out cards, Mark, from your discard pile.
Oh my goodness.
And so overall, I think it is my favorite span of all the spans that you wish to span. Yeah, it's very interesting. I did enjoy playing it. I would check out the stream if you're at all interested. It's great. Finspan.
Most important question: does it have its own dice tower?
No, because there's no dice.
Oh, well, I guess that's forgivable then. I can confirm I was doing some real-time research while you were talking, because my general policy is to never pay attention whenever you're uttering words. And there were sharks in the original Finspan, but presumably not enough.
No, definitely not enough.
Yeah, you can never have too many sharks.
No, and oh man, it was so weird. Like we got so many bioluminescent fish. With the the angler type fish at the very beginning of the game. It's like, what is going on? We had all these like super deep fish, and they all had bioluminescence. It was crazy. It was very weird.
Okay, what's so great about the whale shark?
It's gigantic. It's one of the biggest fish in the ocean, Mark.
Okay, I mean, but they're not as big as whales.
It's a whale and a shark, Mark.
Okay, all right.
It's both in
Does
one.
It transform?
Well, no one's seen it yet, but I'm sure it does. Okay. Why else would they call it that, right?
So I played a strange game from a strange publisher called Genshin Tarot, and this was published by Brother Ming Games. Brother Ming Games is an odd outfit. I've remarked on them before. Their whole shtick is sometimes through crowdfunding, sometimes through direct sales. They sell sometimes merchandise, but often game designs from licensed properties to which they do not have the license. It's
a solid backbone company right there.
Well, I mean, I don't know if backbone is the term, but it's definitely a business model. They first crossed my radar when they were crowdfunding a game called Anna's Roundtable, which was in point of fact a Fire Emblem board game. Fire Emblem being a Nintendo property, and much of the hobby world was just sitting there eating popcorn, waiting for Nintendo to take notice, because Nintendo is known for being very litigious with respect to protecting its intellectual property. One can understand why. Without its intellectual property, Nintendo has next to nothing. And apparently they either didn't take notice or they didn't care, because it went ahead, it fulfilled, people got their copies, and Brother Ming Games continued to Brother Ming. Much of the time, the artwork is entirely fan artwork, a very, very talented collection of fan artists. Because, if you look at fan artwork, a lot of it rivals the original in terms of quality and style. But this is by no means the only way that Brother Ming provides art for his games. For a long time, he sold a Persona 5 board game, and the art assets for there were just ripped from the video game, just corporate assets from the Persona 5 video
game. It's already there, Mark. Like, why go through the trouble when everything's already there for you? It just seems
wasted effort. Yeah,
exactly.
I agree. Efficiency demands it. But anyway, do you know? Have you ever heard of the video game Genshin Impact?
No, I have not.
It is an Android-focused mobile game. It's an action RPG powered by gacha economics. In other words, it's one of those games where, you give them thousands of dollars and that gives you some number of random pulls and you hope to get the right character or a sword or a skin or whatever. And for a long time, it was used as a benchmark because it was one of the most demanding Android games around. Anyway, Genshin Tarot, the board game published by Brother Ming, is the Genshin Impact board game. It has the same characters and the same universe as Genshin Impact. They haven't stolen any art assets that I know of. They've just taken all the intellectual property. At the start of the game, what you do is you end up with a team of heroes, and each team contributes a certain number of cards. And there's a huge number of heroes and a huge amount of asymmetry. And then you play relatively standard fantasy co-op card battler thing, vaguely reminiscent of what you might see from the Sadler Brothers, for example. What's cool about the card play is a lot of it is about triggering elemental effects. So monsters, as a general rule, very frequently spawn with shields. If a monster has a shield, it is immune to all damage. The way you break a shield is by triggering an environmental impact or effect. So I play a card with a fire effect. That doesn't do anything except prime it with fire. And then I play a different card with the wind elemental feature. What that does is it causes a wind elemental explosion, does a certain specific effect, as well as shedding one of the shields. And so you're navigating these 6 different elemental effects to try to overcome the monsters that you have in front of you, again, frequently because they're shielded. And this isn't overwhelming in large part because your heroes, as a rule, specialize in a single element. So typically you're only messing around with one element. And your ability to interact with your opponent's monster tableau is pretty okay. It's a little more parsimonious than I'd like in an ideal world, but most attacks only affect what's in front of you. It is only a minority of effects that target someone in front of someone else. Reminds me a little bit of Daybreak in that regard. You know, most Daybreak cards only affect you. Your ability to pass cards to someone else is minimal in Daybreak to compare it to a very, very different co-op game. I was very pleasantly surprised by the experience of playing Genshin Taro. I don't have much experience with Genshin Impact. I don't know anything about the IP involved. I was very dubious about Brother Ming's business practices. I'm amazed they haven't been sued into oblivion or received a volume of NDAs enough to choke a camel. That's a technical legal term, by the way. But it was very pleasant. The art is really, really well done. That I expected, because again, these are very, very passionate fan artists that contribute art to these projects. And it was just a very pleasant co-op card battler thing where you're triggering a bunch of interesting effects, you're leveling up your characters, you're getting more interesting interactions with the other cards that other people are getting into their decks, etc., etc. It was very enjoyable. It was very cool. The only part that I seriously quibble with is that the game kind of sort of assumes that you know enough about the universe to figure out what's going on, because the process by which you select your characters at the start are just with these draft cards with full card art. There's no description of what they do or what kind of element they specialize in. You literally have to fish out the cards to try to figure out what it is you're dealing with. But other than that, it was extraordinarily well done. It was the information presentation was very good, which is not what I normally expect from the small time publishers like this. And it was really neat. I don't know about the ethics of this kind of business practice, but it was a shockingly solid fantasy co-op game.
Were any of the players like big fans of the app?
I was the only one at the table who knew anything about Genshin Impact, and I know next to nothing about Genshin Impact. The guy who brought the game, this was Woogie's game, he's like, yeah, apparently it's some video thing. I was like, yeah, Genshin Impact. And he says, yeah, I don't know if they use the same art, though. It's like, oh, yeah. These are assets from Genshin Impact. A quick Google search of any one of the characters that were involved. It's like, oh, yeah, this is not inspired by, this is not a riff on, this is the thing. So that's Genshin Taro. Yes, many of the cards were tarot sized. Not the cards you play with, but the cards you select with. That's the only way in which it's tarot. That's Genshin Taro by MingYang, published by Brother Ming Games in 2022. Since then, he's done all kinds of things. Acrylic standees inspired by Final Fantasy XIV, a bunch of other licensed stuff. He's big into Genshin Impact. He's big into Final Fantasy. Maybe someday they'll take notice.
And lastly, for me, I got to play sort of this year's leading game, one of my favorites so far. It is called Recall. It's sort of the sister game to Revive. It was done by the same sort of team. It has the same sort of feel, but is very, very different. And what you're doing in Recall is that you have the set of keys that you sort of plug into your player board. And so the sort of object of the game, because once you plug them in, you have to do a recall, and you pull the keys out and you do some sort of, economic, you get a little bit of income, but you don't want to do that very often. The longer you can bypass that and acquire more keys, the better, because it's sort of, I don't want to say it's a wasted turn, but it's a way to get more crystals and stuff. And I love how they did crystals, because it's the same token. You sort of upgrade them. There's 3 different levels of crystals while you're playing. And it's a game that I really feel as though you're doing the theme. It's like you're advancing out onto this planet. There's different types of buildings that you're building out there. It's not just sort of, well, I'm putting out buildings for the sake of putting out buildings. It's like, no, there's a research center. There's these 3 different types of buildings. You're trying to put out these monuments out in different areas. You're exploring. You're flipping over tiles. You want them to be adjacent to other players. You'll get more points that way. It's very puzzly. You're trying to maximize every turn. you start with these two generic keys that are just white that have no abilities on them, and you just plug them into the actions that you want to do. Later on, you can upgrade those keys, and not only will the keys will now have abilities on them, and so when you plug them in, you get to do whatever you want in any order. They give you these little tokens to track, okay, I do this move, and then I, build, and then anyway, overall, it is a great puzzly combo game, but the combos aren't super ridiculous. They get a little, dicey near the end, but it's not like a Praga or, these other games where, they're going to cycle in now. Oh, this gives me another whole turn, and you go again. Nothing like that. Just, more basic symbols. They're not like super advanced or anything. It's like moving, gathering crystals, upgrading your crystals, doing stuff. I just very much enjoyed it. I played it twice now. It is by far one of my favorites from this year, and that's Recall.
I really want to give it a try. Recall is designed by Helge Meissner, Christian Amundsen Ostby, Kjetil Svensson, and Anna Vermlund. As you say, a lot of the same crew that was involved in Revive, which we both very much liked, and which I keep mistakenly think is Rebirth. Anyway, generic titles. It's an issue. Finally, I got to play Railway Boom. Railway Boom was originally published in 2022 by Hisashi Hayashi under Okazu brand, and it was redesigned with assistance from Simone Luciani, of all people, and republished in 2025 by Arclight Games. This is not entirely unlike Stellar Ventures, which we talked about previously. It's kind of sort of riffing on a cube rails structure, but gesturing towards a slightly more substantial formula. Stellar Ventures, though, was riffing more in sort of standard train idiom towards an 18xx direction about shares and controlling interests and various corporate shenanigans and corporate treasuries, whereas Railway Boom is mostly messing around with things like tableau building and auction mechanics. And indeed, all of Railway Boom is a series of auctions. There's 4 auctions that take place over a given round. You're paying with different currencies, and they all have different effects. I really like auctions, and so I was very much looking forward to see what Railway Boom does with things. The problem, though, is that everything in Railway Boom seems calibrated to take what is basically a very simple set of interactions and make them overlong and potentially uninteresting. I'll focus on the worst offender. When you are expanding your rail, there's no standard operations round, in which case you get a certain amount of opportunity to spend money or something else to expand your rail network. What you do is you engage in a bid to determine which rail card you are able to take. And the rail card tells you where you're going to be starting and how many points of expansion you get from that city. This is always random, though. Every round, a new set of new random cities come up. So the first couple rounds, you're just going to be getting these 2 independent rail networks, very likely, or you might get super lucky, and it might be the case that your second rail city is close to your first rail city, and you're able to connect these up in the first round, right? Or maybe you don't want that to happen. Suffice to say, it leads to a fair amount of randomness because you never know whether a city that is particularly helpful for you will come up at a round where you're flush or not, or maybe won't come up at all. Even worse than that, though, is the problem that it means that advanced planning is almost impossible. There's no point in being able to look at the board and try to strategize where you want to go from where you are, because you have no conception of what the options are going to be next round. And so consequently, every time a new auction starts, everyone is reevaluating the board position from 0. And consequently, as I say, these are not particularly complicated or deep decisions, but they take a very long time considering the quality of decision making that's going on in Railway Boom. Railway Boom would be a perfectly solid 45 to 60 minute cube rail adjacent game. As it is a 2-hour game, which is way longer than it has any right to be, and cannot hold a candle to Cube Rails games, much less other games that are like Stellar Ventures, trying to bridge the gap between Cube Rails games and 18xx games. I liked it, kind of, when I was playing. But even then, when I was playing, as I said, it was always though I was reevaluating from square one every time a new auction came up. And I found that really taxing. So it's alternately taxing and boring. And it's just way too long.
No, you're supposed to say it was wonderful, Mark, because I've ordered it and it's going to be here any day now. So you're supposed to say it's one of the best games you ever played and you can't wait to play it more. That's what my brain is hearing anyway. So I'm very excited now to play it because
I'm
you said it
hundreds
was
of
so
kilometers
good.
away from you, Walker. You can play it and enjoy it. You can be wrong and sit there in your wrongness and stew in the wrongness of your wrongitude, and that's fine. I hope you enjoy it. But as it is, like, we've played lots of Cube Rails games. In point of fact, last week I played Irish Gauge by Amabel Hammond, a 45 to 60-minute tight economic fight involving rail lines. And it was never the case that the rail line got cut off because randomly some city got pulled from the deck of city cards. It was purely as a result of the economic management that was going on there. And again, that's what Cube Rails games are really good at. I'm not saying that every train game has to be like a Cube Rails game. What I'm saying is that if you're going to balloon the length to 2, sometimes 3 times as long as these other train games and make things more arbitrary and more difficult to plan and less satisfying to execute, you've got a problem. And that is largely where I felt Railway Boom was.
Well, when something bad like that happened, did you go like boom? Like, I think that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to make it exciting and, throw the cards on the table. Maybe
I believe the canonical version was, and player 2 bids 15, and boom goes the dynamite.
There you go.
I think that's how it goes. So that's Railway Boom, the 2025 version published by ArcLight Games by Hisashi Hayashi and Simone Luciani. And those are the games we played last week. Now we're going to take a brief break to pay some bills. And we're back with the news and why it doesn't matter. Tell us, what is new, Walker? What are the news?
SVWAG Con. It's coming up. It's inching closer. It gets a week closer every week. It's weird.
How many inches is a week?
I'm going to look into that. It is July 24th to the 26th. Next month. Everything is in place. It's going to be great. Lots of games. Free games for everyone. Maybe even 2 or 3 free games for everybody. Who knows?
It's going
to be a game bonanza, Mark.
We're going to have personalities from the So Very Wrong About Games extended universe. We're going to have refreshments. I am confident that SVWAG is going to punch very much like last time, way above its weight class in terms of amenities, in terms of blandishments. You won't believe the perks, the perquisites. It's going to be great. Tickets are available on the Eventbrite site. The link is in the episode notes below. Similarly, in the event notes below, you will find a link to the Icebreaker events. I've got a geek list up on Board Game Geek for some games. These are for people who aren't necessarily going to be arriving with a large friend group. They may know only 1 or 2 other people there. And I want to make sure that for those that want it, there's a kind of an onboarding process so they can meet new people. By all means, go check it out. There's a link in the episode notes below. We're going to be playing highly social games. Very low barrier to entry. If you have any suggestions for things you'd like to have happen towards there, that's fine too. If, as far as other events that you want, games you want to get played for non-Icebreaker purposes, then there is the Discord available, so you can check out the Discord for SVWAG 2 and try to make plans with fellow gamers there.
SVWAG. Game news for me. There's a game that I've ordered, Mark. I love Star Trek Lower Decks. It's a great show. Makes me laugh. There is, and I've never done an escape room. Even though this is an escape room in a box, this is Star Trek Lower Decks Chaos Protocol. So it's going to be a board game escape room. Looking forward to doing a Star Trek themed escape room.
Oh, great. It might be up your alley. I've never done one either, but the thought of doing an escape room fills me with an experience best described as dread. So there's new game from Devious Weasel and Jennifelli, Witches of Willow Spur. The subtitle is Witches Doing Their Best. And the thing that delights me, number one, is that this is a new game by Jennifelli, designer of Game of the Year Cosmic Frog, as well as a series of really iconic classic designs like the mirroring of Mary King and Murray the A-Hole Frog. And indeed, I think that Devious Weasel is further solidifying its status as the sort of reigning master of the Frogverse, because the theme of Witches of Willow Spur, this is a cooperative game in which you're all playing as young witches trying to undo a curse. The specific curse involved is the curse that turned Murray into a frog. He was always an a-hole, but he wasn't always a frog. And so the continuation that I didn't know I wanted, Witches of Willow Spur, it's coming out soon. I purchased an advanced copy from Devious Weasel. I'm very much looking forward to putting it through its paces. I'm just thrilled that there's more frog connections.
It's the prequel that you never knew you wanted. And that's the news and why it doesn't matter. Now on to our main review, which is GotY.
GotY was designed by Rüdiger Dorn. It was originally published in 2004 by Hans and Gluck. It was republished by Z-Man in 2012 as GotY: A New Expedition. And the latest edition is being published by Quined Games and is largely a straight reprint of the Z-Man Games version of 2012, but with new graphics and a new coat of paint. All the gameplay variants that had been made standard in the Z-Man Games edition are now standard in the Quined edition. More on that later because I have views on the way the auction mechanic has changed. For a while, it looked like Rüdiger Dorn was going to be one of the major heavy hitters of your medium to medium heavy Euros. He designed Traders of Genoa in 2001. He published Jambo in 2004, 2005, Louis XIV, Arcadia in 2006, all excellent medium weight Euro games, Jambo being one of the best two-player KOSMOS small box games. And then he took a hard turn towards designing lighter fare, which is fine, but less necessarily in our immediate wheelhouse. Did Las Vegas in 2012, which we quite enjoyed, especially in its Las Vegas Royale version of 2019, a dice game, but really struck it big and got a lot of mainstream recognition with his 2014 design Istanbul. And since then, that has very much been Rüdiger Dorn's cash cow. A whole bunch of versions of Istanbul, the board game Istanbul, the t-shirt Istanbul, the merchandising. I'm exaggerating, you know what I mean. And Karuba in 2015, which was a not bad roll and write equivalent in the form of a flip in place of the tile genre. But my heart will always belong to Rüdiger Dorn for his economic games of roughly the turn of the century, among them GotY, because I've been playing and very much enjoying that game for over 20 years. Walker, why don't you give us an unhelpful summary about what one does in GotY?
What one does in GotY is throughout the entire game, you're trying to wonder what is the true value of the first player marker, and realizing turn after turn, you still don't understand what the worth of the first player marker is, and wondering if next round you'll get some grasp on what it might be.
Okay, so I guess we're jumping straight into that issue of controversy. So the structure of GotY is it's a it's an 8-round game. Every round you start off with a bunch of auctions. Everyone auctions off one tile, with the exception of the star player who auctions off 2. Then everyone does 3 actions. You rinse and repeat. And this was a structure that was very, very common at the time. So games like Princes of Florence and a bunch of other Euros had the sort of first we do auctions, then we do our multiplayer solitaire business down with the little tracks. And indeed, I would just point out, structurally speaking, with the passing of auctions into comparative disfavor as a means, as a Euro mechanism, not that we don't use it anymore, but it's less common. Now we mostly just have the heads down track management with no auctions, as opposed to GotY, which alternated between the two. In many ways, it was doing tracks before tracks were a thing. The actions consist exclusively of you either activate a track or you improve the track. But since they were core to the gameplay experience, that doesn't quite run afoul of my notorious dislike of tracks. I dislike tracks, especially when they're off to the side, difficult to parse, and nonetheless very, very consequential gameplay. In GotY, they're very much core to the experience, so I object to it less.
Yeah, so you have this grid of tiles, and I'm not sure if it I think it plays out more in a 2-player game of where the auction starts. In a multiplayer game, it sort of can snake anywhere. So there's like sort of a little bit less control, and it might get to tiles that you want anyway, because first you auction off the first player marker, and that's where the auction will start. And then you start on that sort of grid space. The next bid must be adjacent to that, and then the following bid adjacent to that one, and so forth. And it creates this snake through this grid of tiles. Like I said, usually it could make it to where you want to go anyway, but I can see in a 2-player game where you could really, there would be a strategy of where, to start the auction to deny people tiles, as opposed to, not almost guaranteeing if there's a particular tile near the outside that you want as the first player, you're probably more likely going to be able to choose it.
And for what it's worth, this sort of dropping things behind and like making these paths that then determine the contours of how the particular action is going to go. This was very common of a lot of Rüdiger Dorn's designs from 20 years ago. So that's how the trading sequence worked in the Traders of Genoa. You decided where it was called a cart, but whatever. There was a stack of tokens. One player decides where it goes. One player moves it one space. Then another player moves it another space from that. Louis XIV had dropping things behind like this. I remember one player, someone pejoratively calling it Rüdiger Dorn's pooping mechanism. But anyway, So you're right that the choice of how to control the economy is more a big picture one than a fine grained one, because broadly speaking, as the start player who determines where the auctions are starting from, you can look at the board and say, okay, I want this tile to be potentially in the mix or not. Past that, you don't have a whole lot of fine grained control because, as you say, what the other players do can send it in other directions. The key benefit for being the start player is that the start player gets an extra action every round and also gets to auction off 2 tiles every round. The way the auction system used to work in GotY is it's a once around auction where the auctioneer has the last choice to bid, and whoever wins pays the auctioneer unless the auctioneer wins the bid, in which case they pay the bank. So I'm the auctioneer. I am selling off this plantation that produces ginger, for example, and Asimi bids 2, and Huey bids 4, and Walker bids 6. I have 2 choices. I can take Walker's $6, or I can pay 7 to the bank. So it's a $13 swing, not actually dollars. The new rules have changed that. The new rules ever since 2012 have it that I have to pay 1 less than the highest bid. It's no longer I pay 7 to the bank or take the 6. It's I take the 6 or I pay 5 to the bank. Consequently, you see the auctioneer paying the bank more often, as opposed to before, where you tended to want to put your marker on tiles that you thought other people would want because you were going to pocket their money. Now you put your tile on things that you think you want because you know that you'll have the best chance of getting it. I'm not a huge fan of that change. I'm also not a huge fan of the change that makes the economy less closed feeling. The base version, the economy felt to a certain extent closed. There's an action to get more money, absolutely, and people would do that, and lots more money entered the system, but most of the money just passed hands between other people based on who would auction off what and when. And I thought that that was a more interesting economic dynamic than the newer version. What are your thoughts, Walker?
No, I agree. The fact that the person to the left, like you said, you pick the tiles and the person to the left starts the bid. So it goes around the table and it will come back to the person that decided which tile was going to be auctioned. So they're going to get the final choice. And like you said, more often than not, the people bought their tile that they wanted because they get a discount of 1 and it usually didn't get that high. And I can see where if at least they had to pay the same amount, there's a little bit more control and a little bit, people would understand exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah, some people propose that as a variant to the changes in 2012 that you pay the same amount rather than 1 less. I don't know. It is particularly problematic in the context of auctioning off start player. Because as I said, there's an auction to get more money. Say when you take an action to get more money, you get $6. Well, therefore, an extra action card is worth at least $6 to you. It's not quite that simple because when you have the money is as important as how much money you have, but it's worth at least $6 to you. And so say you're sitting in that position, you're the last bid before the auctioneer can decide. It's worth $6 to you. If you bid 6, the auctioneer can take it for 5. That's a no-brainer for the auctioneer. It's worth 6. They'll pay the 5. So how do you bid to make sure that you really put pressure on the auctioneer? You bid what it's not worth? You bid 8? Well, I don't know. If you're swimming in money, maybe that makes sense, and maybe you take that hit for next round. But it's you end up in situations where the start player stays with the same individual for a very long time. At least that's the way it's always shaken out when I played it. Maybe I'm playing suboptimally. I don't know. But in the past versions, it was more fluid.
Because those extra actions are very powerful because you only get 3 actions after the auctions. And one of the actions is almost always to get more money. And to go up any of the tracks, you need boats. So more often than not, the second action would be to get more boats. And now you have 1 action. Are you going to go up a track, or are you going to get goods, or are you going to do something else? So every action is very important. And so just to double down on what you said, knowing how much that first player token is, because you get the compass card. There's very few ways to get other compass cards that give you the extra actions. And not only do you get that, but you also get to bid. You also get to choose a tile on top of that as well.
The final thing I'll note as the old men yelling at clouds with respect to the different editions is that the first edition and the second edition by Z-Man Games, they were both unapologetic Euro celebrations of colonialism. Like the Portuguese have come to do commerce in India, yay, Portugal. And it was just, the standard problematic idiom that we're all pretty familiar with in the context of board games. they've done a reasonably good job of giving the indigenous Indian people more agency in this version. So on the player boards, you see a portrait not of a Portuguese dude in a frilly colonialist outfit like you would in the first edition of GotY, first 2 editions. That's what was on all the colonist cards. But colonist cards have been replaced by contracts, which are more generic, and the people on player boards are very clearly people from the subcontinent. So there's that. The intro to the rulebook smacks a little bit of we're just going to wave away the bad things that happened during colonialism, but at least it's better than raw Portuguese colonization of the subcontinent. So there's that.
And there's a puzzly aspect to it as well. Like I said, because you only have the 3 actions, there's ways to double up. Like when you get new tiles that produce goods or hold goods, they come full. So instead of having to take a produce action to fill those up, you say, oh, I really need, this particular color of market good. You can say, well, I'll just, I'll get this outpost that has that. So now I can skip that produce action and then I get to do what I want. Stuff like that. After you've played 4 rounds, you're going to clear that whole auction market out with the day tiles, and you're going to have these new night tiles that come in that are a little, upscale, a lot of end game scoring stuff in there, a lot of extra stuff. So the tiles pretty well consist of, warehouses that are going to store your goods, extra cards, stuff like that. So there's like a good grab bag, and they did a great job of making them fairly balanced. There's never that one tile that you have to have that's, better than all the other tiles. They're nice, fairly unique. They'll be worth more to individual people, but overall balanced well.
Yeah, I mean, there's some that are better than others. There's a tile in the second half of the game that says you could replace this tile with any other tile on the board. So obviously buying that is better than any other single tile left on the board, but nothing outside the bounds of reason. And as you say, nothing that are must-haves. You have the ability to gently guide the overall economy of the game where you need it to be. If you're desperately short of a given type of resource, like dried fish, yeah, you can plop your auction marker on a dried fish token. Failing that, if you don't manage to win the auction, you might then spend one of your actions to found an outpost, colonies in the original version, that gives you dried fish, and that saves you an action that way. And it's all about efficiency. There was a serious objection to the way the economy was balanced in the first edition. They changed the economic costs of a variety of things in the new expedition version, which again has been preserved in the Quined version. As I say, I've been playing Goa off and on for about 20 years, ever since it's been published. And I will say this, I think the route to victory is pretty clearly established. You max out the expeditions track, you max out the production track because they have great symmetry with each other. There's an expedition card, for example, that allows you to get lots and lots of benefits based on how strong your production track happens to be. Whereas, boats and colonies don't interact in the same way, whereas taxation doesn't really interact in the same way. And pretty much every time I play Goa, this is just me being in a rut. I'm not asserting this is the dominant strategy or anything. But every time I play Goa, my board ends up in more or less the same state. But how I get there is almost always different based on how the overall economy developed. And there's many different ways to get at the same end goal. I still don't find it repetitive after all this time. Partially that's because the rate of playing has dropped off. I used to play it like every other week when it first came out. It was my favorite economic Euro for a long time. But it does get a little repetitive at times, even though there's some variety underneath that. But with all that having been said, revisiting it over the course of the past few weeks has been very, very satisfying, even though I was doing the same thing I always do.
On the subject of the outposts, the older versions change this. Now there's a module, because when you try to form an outpost, this is just another way to store your goods and a way to get points at the end. Because if you fill out your, it's one of these triangular scoring things, the more outposts you have, the more points you're going to get. And it's right now, the standard game, the new one, is a sort of push your luck. You need to get to a certain contract value. It starts off, I think it goes 8, 12, 16, something like that anyway. You need to have that many sort of contracts. And so you're going to flip up 2 cards off the Explorer deck, and they have contract symbols in the bottom. And that's your sort of starting thing. And then you could play contracts from your card to get to the level that you want. And you have to say what you're going for. You can't say, I'm going for 8, and you just have to hit 12 and say, oh, I'll take the 12 one then. No,
Yeah,
it doesn't work that way. And in the earlier game, and there's a module for this one, you just get a set value now instead of getting those 2 random cards, because it happened a few times in the games that we played where one person would hit 2 2s and couldn't get what they wanted, whereas other people would, far exceed what they needed. And that sort of randomness did not sit well.
Yeah, well, 2 is the expected value, actually. Each exploration card will give you 1 to 3. So the expected return is going to be 4 off a given flop. And that's typically what I plan for. It's like, okay, well, if I get 4, can I found the outpost? And if you hit 3 or worse yet 2 on the reg, that's just really, really painful. And worst of all, because it's a deck of cards, the worse you do, the better off everyone else does, right? It's like I failed my sure shot. That just means that everyone else has a better chance of making a risky shot.
You've weeded out all the ones for us, Mark. That was awfully nice of you.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The optional module that makes it deterministic is by far my preferred way to play.
Speaking of modules, I'll just plop this in here. I was going to do it at the end, but there's a bonanza module which puts some tiles underneath the corner tiles of the auction, which is sort of increase the benefit. There's a gambit module which gives you some sort of like things that will increase actions during the game. A stories module which sort of like starting powers and gives you more stuff, and a captain's module which is just more of the same, which is like just asymmetric powers for the whole game. Lots of interesting stuff there for sure. Also a solo campaign mode, which seemed very interesting.
Oh, that part I didn't know. Oh, geez. Of course, there's a solo campaign mode. I was just about to say, I'm really glad that Go is back in print, but I guess if you're going to get a game back in print, it's going to have a whole bunch of the contemporary crowdfunding model attached to it.
So, yeah, I very much enjoyed coming back to it. I'm fairly sure I played it back when it first came out. Nothing popped back into my head when we started playing it, but the Wendigo, had all those, all the old school standards. So I'm sure we played it at least once way back in the day, and I'm glad we got it back to the table. Very interesting. Plays very, I feel it plays quickly for what you get out of it. You're constantly thinking when the actions that other people do are very quick, and there's not a ton of, other than the auction where there's player interaction, after that there's not much people can do to stop you from planning out your turn and deciding either to go up your tracks, because it's one of those standard things. We didn't really explain it. There's your boat track, and it gets you X boats. If you go up your boat track, when you take the boat action again, you'll get more boats. So the further down you go on the boat track, the more boats you'll get when you take that action. So it's this, figuring out, what do I want to do? Do I want to make it more action efficient? Do I want to take a boat action every other turn so I have enough boats? Or do I want to go up that track so I can take it maybe twice the whole game and have enough boats for what I need to do? Stuff like that.
Or do I try to get my boats from another source, either by buying them from a tile in the central board because there are lots of boats to be had there, or by bypassing the requirement for boats by trying to get exploration cards because a number of them can sub for boats in a variety of ways. Again, it's about efficiency, and mostly the game is about maximizing as many tracks as you can and getting to those 4 outposts. But there's a bunch of different ways to get there, and that's why, as I say, it's a little bit superficially repetitive because I find myself having my economy evolve in the same ways roughly every game. The way I get them there is different every time, and that's why, much to my delight, found that Go is not as repetitive as it might have seemed. And I do think that it certainly merits its position to be back in print after all this time.
I just want to double down on the tracks because I thought it was very interesting, because it definitely is a strategy. The further down the tracks you get, the more points at the end of the game, because that's another way to get points. But another thing is, as you go down, if you get all the tracks equal, you're going to get those elusive compass cards, which are very hard to get, more actions. And if you're the first to get to the bottom of tracks, you get even more benefit. So lots to suss out on these turns.
Let's go up. Try it out on Board Game Arena if you're at all curious.
Just so. And that'll just about do it for this episode of So Very Wrong About Games. I would like to thank our listeners.
Thank you, listeners.
You can take over anytime, Mark. I've never done this outro before.
Well, no. You said that you would like to thank the listeners, and then you said nothing. That was your opportunity to thank the listeners.
Gotcha. Thank you, listeners, ever so much for sticking with us. I hope to see many of you at the upcoming convention. Very excited for that. Lots of stuff happening. Stay tuned for more.
We're very excited for all that. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can find all our contact information on our website at sowronggames.com. We hope to see you again soon, either on the internets or in person. Take care of yourselves, take care of your hobby, and as always, please do thank your rules explainer.
Peace!